One of the neat things the last few weeks, with a lot of discussion about conferences, who's adding, who's not, and the TV media rights and deals and all that, is that, last week, Bob Thompson, former Fox Sports executive, was on this for 2 days, back-to-back days, gave us all sorts of insight. And Pat Crakes does the same thing, former Fox Sports executive with Crakes Media and a consultant, and kind of they've been able to, like, when people respond or say something, or they have, at least in a lot of ways, such great experience that they can give us an idea of what really might be going on behind the scenes if, in fact, we ask him. And so that's why we invited Pat to come on the show. Pat, thanks for your time. So last time we had Bob Thompson on, and Sports Illustrated did a feature on him, so you'll be next to be your 15 minutes of fame.
Well, that's very kind. If I got mentioned in the same breath with the great Bob Thompson, that would be tremendous. He's one of the architects, or one of the co-architects of the modern TV media infrastructure, and he's quite an executive, and it was good for me to get to know him when I was at Fox Sports, and it's just that's a great compliment. Thank you.
So what do you think about all this going on? I know it's a big, huge bowl of whatever you want to grab onto, but obviously the Big Ten is on the verge of their announcement. The Pac-12 is trying to figure out what they do, and the Big 12 is watching very closely, as is everybody else. What are your thoughts about right now in college football with all of these media things going on?
Well, I think, big picture, what we've seen is that Fox Sports, Fox, and ESPN have kind of ended their cooperative duopoly of the last 10 years. And they've done what we call our business here, they've consolidated, with Texas and Oklahoma joining the SEC, and now USC and UCLA joining the Big Ten. That project of being cooperative in that duopoly is kind of over. That doesn't change the fact that it's still a college football duopoly, but let's call it a non-cooperative duopoly, or a kind of, we're now self-contained, but we control so much of the college football inventory that it's still a duopoly. And what's interesting is the way Fox Sports is allocated out. It looks like, I'm not completely sure, but it looks like the inventory, they've allocated a game to CBS, a game every week to NBC, or most weeks, and then something maybe for Peacock or streaming somewhere else, but I would probably bet it'd be Peacock. That doesn't create a third pillar of college football sports distribution. The NBC with a window of Big Ten becomes like a half a pillar, but it doesn't change the fact that Fox and ESPN are the dominant forces. And this is about this round of consolidation, and then it's looking out towards the college football playoff and its expansion, and Fox and ESPN are both set. So my friend, who's Robert Seidman, who lives in Waco, who lives in El Paso, tweeted out, ESPN will be fine. We can say ESPN and Fox Sports will both be fine. Their duopoly stays intact, and you can expect them to exert that force in the college football negotiations to expand the playoffs.
Is this good news for the Pac-12 and the Big 12 that ESPN has inventory and money available, or is that to be determined?
I think that directionally it is good news. Those late windows, Pac-12 after dark week, that they actually embraced that, and that was good. Those are 7 p.m. local games at 10 o'clock. Those games have value to pay TV distributors. Make no doubt about it. Pay TV pays the bill. It'll pay 80% of the bills for this. It's not about advertising, though advertising is enormous. It's 20% of the economics, 25% of the economics. So those windows, that inventory that Pac-12 has value to pay TV distributors. They realize it today with both Fox and ESPN, and they will realize it tomorrow. And so that's something the Pac-12 still has, even though it's definitely impacted by the loss of the LA schools. They'll be able to play that card. ESPN has some holes to fill. And though I think they were always planning on getting less inventory from the Big Ten in this round, they have a negotiation with pay TV distributors. They're going to say, hey, what happened to your Big Ten? Well, they can say things like, we've added more Pac-12. We still have these late windows. That's how pay TV and they'll be able to credit themselves for F1 and other investments they've made to kind of not only keep themselves flat, but move themselves up and get an increase with the pay TV distributors. So I think it's directionally good news for the Pac-12. The question is, how will it really manifest itself? and what happens to the Big 12 as part of that. But I think it's directionally good news for the Pac-12. The Big 12 is another question. But for the Pac-12, I do think it's directionally good news.
So there has been, we've discussed this before, Pat, on this show, that the good news right now, it appears, for the Pac-12 is maybe that their contract is up, because now there's this change with what Fox or ESPN, what just happened with the Big Ten. And then again, it was thought to be kind of an albatross because it's right now, and it means they're on the clock. And the Big 12 has a couple of years, 2 or 3 years, to kind of sit back and watch. Is now, because of it being up for the Pac-12 as far as their timeline, has it all of a sudden turned to be a pretty good thing?
Well, I don't know if you can. So it's not. It's not a good thing because they lost USC and UCLA.
Right.
And that is not something they're going to recover from, in a sense. But is it a good thing that this has played out? On the overall on the landscape? Yes, this is an opportunity for them. And look, I often liken content acquisitions on television or for channels to modern finance portfolio theory. You're putting different things in your portfolio. ESPN's portfolio just changed. Their needs just changed. The Pac-12 has some things that are unique. They have some really great competitive brands that play in the college football playoff. They have great tradition, and they have unique windows. And suddenly that becomes something that makes them more valuable, I would think, at least when you start to think about it as a strategist, to ESPN. So at the same time, Fox is allocating a lot of resources to the Big Ten. They may not need the Pac-12 anymore. And so this has emerged as something that could help the Pac-12. The landscape's unfolded that way because the nature of the portfolios have changed. And now Pac-12 has something that's useful to ESPN, and that's what drives value. And they have scarcity too, which drives value by those late windows. I'm not going to put every game in that late window, but those late windows do have value with pay TV, and that's what matters.
There was thought, at least back when Kevin Warren spoke at Big Ten Media Days, and of course there's been some gauntlets thrown either by him or even Kliavkoff, and Brett Yormark kind of made it clear that the Big 12 open for business. There was this number that was like thrown out there about the Big Ten, and that all of a sudden everybody, including USC and UCLA, were going to get $100 million a year in distribution. Bob actually sent us a text a couple of days, I think, ago and said, that's way too high. That doesn't mean they can't get there. Was that something that, Pat, you looked at that number being thrown around at $100 million each, and you're like, what?
Well, look, the truth gets its, a lie gets itself, or deception gets itself halfway around the world before the truth gets its pants on. And I think that number is high. It doesn't mean it can't get there, but I think it's high. Now, the number is going to be different than what anybody else has. The only one that will be in the realm of it will be the SEC. And the SEC, when ESPN grabs that number one pick back, their value in Texas and Oklahoma come in, that's going to change some of the value of the SEC a little bit. But the truth of the matter is, the number, if it's 100 million, 80 million, whatever, it's just a paradigm shift kind of number. And it reflects the importance of college football as a top 5 reason to have a pay TV bundle in an era in which the established pay TV bundle is in secular decline, but makes more money than ever. Keeping people inside it for a reason, sports and news has emerged of that, is better than the alternative of going to digital distribution, which on a cost accounting basis loses a ton of money and seems to be losing more money all the time. So they're going to get a lot of money. It seemed like a big number. Bob is, obviously Bob's correct. It's huge. But at the same time, it's kind of beside the point because the numbers are big enough to make the Big Ten and the SEC, both of them, they're different than everybody else. And no type of merger or alignment is going to change that in the next 5 years.
So how do, beyond that 5 years, the other 3 conferences, or anybody, I guess, theoretically, go about making themselves better in the eyes of TV execs so they can close that gap? Because if I'm Clemson and I'm making $36 million a year and Rutgers is making 80, I might be a little miffed about that.
Well, well, Rutgers is the home of college football.
Yeah.
But God bless them. But your point's well taken. I think that first of all, because of the value of college football overall, even before any of this realignment was going on, they're going to draft off of that sum overall. But they need to figure out a way to keep the Big Ten and the SEC in the front windshield. All right. And barring the best schools across those three conferences, you mentioned finding a way to get out of their deals and assembling a new super conference, which seems really hard to do. They're going to have to figure out how to kind of do that front windshield kind of positioning. I think the ACC has a good advantage in the sense that they're core to ESPN and they're already there. ESPN created their channel for them. They have a long deal, but partners have conversations. And I won't predict that they're going to end up with more economics somehow, but it wouldn't shock me if there's a change to that deal somewhere at some point here.
We have had
as far as the go ahead.
Go finish the second part. I'm sorry.
Yeah. The Pac-12 and the Big 12 are, they're all three going to be a part of a college football playoff. The question is, how much of a part are you going to be a part of that? And ESPN, going back to the ACC, they are part of ESPN. ESPN is going to be part of an expanded college football playoff. That's good for them, right? The ACC. The Pac-12 and the Big 12 need to get a piece of that too. On their own, they have great value. I talked a little bit about the value of the Pac-12. The Big 12 has great value too. They just don't get a real shot at this until 2025. But Brett is a very, very smart guy. I know Brett, and he's a great choice for commissioner. Figuring out how to create value together, in my opinion, has always been the right thing for the Pac-12 and the Big 12 to do. I think the Pac-12's got some opportunities right now, but I'll be honest, and just at the risk of getting calls from my friends at ESPN, I think there's an opportunity for ESPN to figure out how to make that happen in some way. Because they've got the space. I mean, remember, ESPN has the most distribution, 4 linear networks that are programmed, a broadcast television network, and 22.5 million subscribers inside their standalone streaming product. They've got the distribution heft to take everybody on that's left. Will they do that? They've got to look internally at what their strategy says. This didn't surprise them. I mean, this caught everybody a little flat-footed because it came together pretty fast. But nobody's shocked that we were going to have some kind of consolidation like this, I don't think. So they're going to move fast to get their own house in order. And I wouldn't be surprised if down the line, ESPN figures out a way to get enough value together from the 3 non-Big Ten SEC conferences to create incentives and economic value in a college football playoff that works for the conferences and ESPN. They have an incentive to do that. The interesting thing is that NBC is going to become like, if the two pillars are Fox and ESPN, NBC with Notre Dame and a window of Big Ten football becomes like a half a pillar, right? They're like a half a pillar. And I would say the ACC is a half a pillar and the Big 12 probably is too. What roles there? And is there any interest in the Pac-12 or the Big 12 from CBS or NBC? It's hard for me to see it because you got to have places to put this stuff. CBS has a bit of a different distribution strategy, but things change fast. But overall, we're probably going to see a creation of some kind of matrix between these conferences that aren't the Big Ten and the SEC that create value that would be hard for us to draw up, not being intensely part of a company's planning process. We'll probably be a little surprised by some of it. I wouldn't doubt it.
Pat, to also for CBS to add another conference, which they've only been doing the SEC, and if they keep doing their same thing, they'd only be doing the Big Ten. And Fox has added, they have Notre Dame and they've added this Big Ten. But if they were to add another conference, they would essentially be saying, which has not been their MO for a long time, that at 12, 3, or 3:30 and 7, they're going to have games all the way through the day. But that would be a complete shift. So would that shock you if they did something like that?
Well, it would shock me a little bit on broadcast television. It would force them to reevaluate the role of CBS Sports Network. CBS Sports Network is a well-distributed pay TV channel that's not rated by Nielsen Media Research because it's very expensive to do that. And they would have to, remember, Fox has a pay TV channel, a broadcast channel, but they don't have a streamer, but they have enough to get their distribution work done. And they're totally committed to sports. On the broadcast side, so you can clear out the space. CBS, it has a much more diverse programming mix. And taking time away from broadcast affiliates is not necessarily something that's easy to do because they get to program that time and keep all the money themselves. When the network gives them programming, they get less units in it. So it's got to be something that shows a lot of value for the affiliate body. And there's like 200 of them. At the same time, CBS owns like 15 of them, I think. I don't remember off the top of my head, but they own some of them. And those retransmission fees from broadcast count a lot. So they could shift their strategy. But that's why I say I think that they're probably set where they are. It's NBC that has to make some decisions about what they want to do with USA Now and maybe even the broadcast television network. But they could add an extra window, either one of them. I just think it has to be valuable enough to make sense. And that goes back to, are the Pac-12 and the Big 12 in their current configuration valuable enough to create another incremental window? Do you think, and do you want to be in the postseason college football game? I think it's clear NBC would like to do that. CBS, they may choose a different route to value creation, but their resources also, which by the way is a perfectly legitimate strategy, and they're happy with their one game of Big Ten. That could be the case.
Pat, the Big 12 reacted almost very quickly with what they did with Cincinnati, Houston, UCF, and also Brigham Young. And obviously, Bob Bowlesby and the Big 12 were on the canvas, and they've been there before because of what's happened back 10, 12 years ago. How important was that, not just at the time, because it seemed to stabilize everything when you lose two huge names, but how important is that now, going forward with what we see now, today?
I think it's pretty important. If they didn't have those schools, I'd be really kind of bewildered about what direction they're going to go. And so I think adding those extra schools, those schools are rising football powers, and they are competitive. And for crying out loud, Cincinnati was in the college football playoff last year. These are schools that have been competitive, are committed to football as a primary sport at their schools. And that's very important. And they match up well because there are multiple programs in the Big 12 that still feel that way. And while, it's hard to say, I don't want to disparage anybody, but look, Texas and Oklahoma are hard to replace. But the point of the matter is that if they didn't have those extra schools right now, kind of the best of the rest, they'd have a lot less leverage and a lot less to work with as they navigate the next 2 years to try to get as much value as they can, keep Fox and ESPN in the front, keep the Big Ten and the SEC in that front window, and figure out a way to get as many access points to the expanded college football playoff as possible.
So you're saying that a lot of discussion, Pat, I know we're keeping you a lot longer than I said. I hope you don't mind because it's great information and insight because of your experience and knowledge. But there was this, there's going to be the SEC and Big Ten, and they're going to both play each other for the national championship in some kind of 6, 8, 10, 12. But the other schools that are still Power 5 or Power 5 now, they'll be a part of it. They just may not have as many pieces to the puzzle.
Well, that's right. So how is this going to get organized? I mean, theoretically, okay, if they really wanted to play hardball, the SEC and the Big Ten now could theoretically create their own playoff and just invite who they want that's not part of the SEC and the Big Ten. They could probably get away with that. And so that's an enormous amount of leverage. And their media networks draft off of that. So when we come back in to look at an expanded college football playoff, you're going to need multiple distribution points. You're probably going to want multiple networks bidding. That's Fox and ESPN, right? And so if you're a conference, you want to either actually be a part of their ecosystem, or you're going to have to find a way to make it so that you can't be ignored or your media partner can't be ignored. And that's the challenge, right? Because in reality, if somebody really wanted to get, pithy with the SEC and the Big Ten, they literally could start their own system. I don't think that's going to happen, but they could do it. They have the schools, the distribution, the economics, and then they just say, hey, Oregon, or hey, Houston, you're the number 6 team in the country. Here's an invite for you.
Yeah. The Big 12, if they were able to, and we don't know if that's going to happen because of what the Pac-12 is trying to do to help stabilize what they are. There's thoughts about Oregon, Washington, Stanford, whatever else. But there does seem to be some pretty good smoke about what they might be able to do with what they call the four corner schools. But if the Big 12 added, let's say, 3 or 4 teams to who they are now from the Pac-12, does that give them any overall better value, or is that just adding teams to add teams?
Hey, look, we're at a place now with ESPN and Fox where their core conferences add so much value that it's hard to see how adding anybody except somebody who's absolutely going to a pay TV distributor say that's worth more, like Notre Dame. It's hard to see how much more incremental money you can get for that.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there's a possibility if the Big 12 could expand with the Four Corners schools, that it could get more than what it's getting right now on its own. And maybe on a small basis, it makes more. But we're at a place now for ESPN and Fox. That would have to be for somebody else. ESPN and Fox, we're just, the Big Ten and the SEC, whoever gets added has to clearly bring incremental value to each school when they're done, and their media partners.
Right.
It's hard to see how those four schools do it. Now, if you combine the whole thing together, maybe you've got something. But it's just those four corners. And I was born at the University of Arizona. My dad's an Arizona graduate. I love Arizona. But I hear a lot of that. I see it. Makes sense for geography and play. But pay TV economics, it doesn't, I think, move the number near enough to be strategic in any way.
And if the Big Ten is going to be 75 million or whatever that number is going to be, 80, 85, 90, eventually 100, does Washington or Oregon or even Stanford bring enough to the table where that would stay the same if they were added or go bigger?
Well, I think it depends on when you add it. I mean, sometimes one of the problems is you have to go, you acquire content or you improve your content, and you go have a conversation with pay TV distributors. And part of the art form of doing these negotiations is actually knowing really how much they can pay. And the truth of the matter is we've got examples where people have bid too much for stuff in the past 10 years. Mostly it's the local sports side, and then the channel ended up getting no distribution. Time Warner Cable's bid to the Dodgers is a great example where Time Warner Cable went bankrupt and Charter bought them because they overpriced what they gave the Dodgers. Dodgers have done well, but the channel is gone. The channel now belongs to a different company because they couldn't get distribution because the price they had to charge for the channel was so high. So, when you go to a pay TV distributor, you're looking to say, I've got a lot of value here. How do I increase this? You need to recognize it. It's hard to see how you can't do that without really specific pieces that grow the pie now, because the numbers have gotten so big. So if you're one of if you're not the SEC and you're not the Big Ten, the challenge is how to assemble those pieces. And Oregon and Washington are great. I mean, those are elite college football teams, but the Big Ten's so loaded now. If you go right now with USC and UCLA, I don't know that you're not leaving money on the table if you don't add them later. What you do is you maybe go this time and go to the pay TV distributors. They're going to have to pay a lot more for college football, to NBC if the deal's true, to CBS, to ESPN because the SEC is better, and Fox. You wait 3 or 4 years. The distributors pass on the price increases, and they digest it, and now you come back with more expansion. I would still think, even in 3 years, unless you were getting Notre Dame or you were getting Oregon and Washington and Stanford and Cal, because you get the whole Bay Area, even though it is the Bay Area, it still has value. I know people think it doesn't, but it does. And make it up, right? Whatever your expansion is, you get 5 or 6 teams. Maybe that has value, but it's getting to a place where it's tough, right? The value creation by adding teams to Big Ten and SEC, I think, has gotten a lot harder, and the bar's a lot higher. So the question is, if you're a college football commissioner, where do you add value? And the answer is, with people who you're going to have to find either amongst yourselves, or you're going to have to make some kind of case that I can't see to say that you have a lot of value to close the gap between the Big Ten and the SEC, who don't need to expand anymore. They really don't.
Pat, Baylor, as you know, has had their ups and downs, but they have been elite in men's basketball, elite women's basketball, non-revenue sport, and their football team has been rebuilt 3 times in the last decade or 12 years. And they were last year ranked number 5, won the Sugar Bowl, won the Big 12. They don't have a big market. Waco's not a large market. It's close to Dallas, and they have great alumni in Dallas, Houston, and elsewhere. But they're not a big market. But they are a team and a school and athletic department that is incredibly successful right now. Does that bring any value whatsoever?
Well, when you think about there in Waco, and Baylor has a lot of value. Look, Baylor and all the Texas schools command Texas. Texas is one of the football centers, one of 3-4 football centers in the United States. It's the second largest state. It has 4 or 5 major metropolitan areas in the top 20, 3 or 4 in the top 10. There's just a lot of reasons to like all the Texas schools, but in particular Baylor, and football program. The challenge is that already being realized by Texas's move to the SEC, right? So it's like you're not additive to the conversation to the pay TV distributor, who's already going to get raked over the coals and then have to turn to their consumers and raise prices. So it's like, and Baylor, and you go, no, if you're the pay TV distributor, I just gave you a bunch for Texas. Baylor's great, thank you. So Baylor's biggest value creation opportunity is being part of something that Texas is not now. And that's where if they were to join something, make it up, I'm not predicting this, the ACC, well, that would be interesting, right? Because now you've got access to Texas, and the ACC didn't have access to Texas. Not that the ACC didn't have access to, but college football is a national sport. We make too much of these regions. But if Baylor's going to be a top 10 team every year, that Clemson, Baylor, Clemson, Florida State, because you got to imagine Florida State's going to come back. Whatever, North Carolina, those things have value. So when you think about what creates value for Baylor, Baylor can have value, but may not be able to realize it in a place like the SEC.
By the way,
that's the point.
Paul is a Florida State graduate, and he just passed out on the set when you said that.
Pat, I imagine it every day.
I mean, you all of a sudden became a daily guest. All right, I have a question for you, and you're gonna. I know a guy that knows you. I know somebody that knows you. Fun question for you. With your military background, when you were at Fox, weren't you involved in helping build out the Fox Sports NFL facility for the troops in the Middle East? And how many great stories came from that time?
So first of all, that was a great initiative that the company did, building the Fox Sports lounges in Afghanistan and in Kuwait and in other places. I was a senior executive at Fox Sports, and obviously I was at a high level involved in a lot of different decision making, but the practical build out of that was not something I had a part of. Did I support it? Of course. But the point of the matter is that was done by a separate group of folks that we hired to build it out. And then a very good TV executive who's getting his name in the papers all the time or in the news all the time, Larry Jones, really took responsibility for that. Larry's one of the very senior executives at Fox Sports, has been there forever since its inception. I was there as well, but I was at the bottom. I was a research analyst. He started right away as an executive. And he took that under his wing and developed a lot of that. So I supported it, obviously. I was thrilled to see us do it. But it wasn't like I led that project. But there were like 10 to 15 of us that managed the company as the company got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And I certainly was a part of supporting that and being enthusiastic about it. But it really was done at the highest level, I'll be honest with you, for the people that I worked for. David Hill and Eric Shanks and Larry was the person who helped put that together with the production team and everything else. But when you build out those lounges, Fox Sports is giving their marks and everything, and we're listening to people, but there's other people building the actual physical facility. What I think we did a really great job of is making sure that we always embraced and highlighted the role of the military. And I was a part of some of those, whether it was going to Pearl Harbor, or to do the pregame show, or whether doing a pregame show from an aircraft carrier in the Mediterranean or from Afghanistan itself, which the pregame show went to, playing basketball games in the gym over on Pearl Harbor. Those types of things are fun for the service folks, and they really send a message that they matter and they enjoy that, because it is big time TV. It's big time media. It's showbiz, right? And it's exciting, and they get to be a part of that. And I think Fox continues to do that, and they do it extraordinarily well. You only have to look at last night's Field of Dreams presentation. Yep. I just don't say that because I spent 24 years there, right? It's because it's really true. They do care about this. So I didn't have any kind of real role in that aside from supporting it, but I will say that I'm very proud that we did that. And I was part of other things that we did on business side and some things like that. Your
Twitter handle is Aquinas82nd. Where did that come from?
Aquinas, St. Thomas Aquinas is my patron. It's very simple. He's my patron saint, and I spent 3 years in the 82nd Airborne Division active duty as an enlisted man.
Yep.
And then I went to officer candidate school and became an officer.
One of the elite of all time, the 82nd Airborne Division. So Crakes Media, you do that. We mentioned Bob Thompson. He has his consulting firm as well. How much right now are people contacting you anymore now because of what's going on, or about the same?
So it's a very small business, and people talk all the time. So I've been asked my opinion on things. I don't have any formal clients at the moment, but I know everybody, and I think Bob may or may not be in the same situation here. When you're talking about these very biggest deals, Fox Sports and ESPN have they have my staff that's still there to do a lot of this work. It's not like Larry Jones is going to get something out of me telling him, or Burke Magnus at ESPN is going to get something out of me saying. They understand that. That doesn't mean that people don't want my opinion on things. My clients are pretty diverse. A lot of them are on the investing side these days. They do a lot of work with private equity and things like that. So it's a very small business. Everybody talks to each other. We keep some secrets, keep a lot of secrets. But I don't have any formal consulting role in this. It doesn't mean that I haven't had one in the past or will have one in the future. It's just, consultants are expensive.
You're right, and
that's my dream job.
Yeah, no, and by the way, when you're done, block my number. I'm telling you right now, block my number. I will be in touch with you, and it's the worst thing you ever did was give me your cell phone number. But I'm telling you, Pat, our chat room. And again, like I mentioned, Bob, because both of you have been in the middle of this. I mean, you have been where when there's heat and there's fire and there's things going on that are important and decisions and all of that at the table when these things are being done. And it's been I'm smarter because of the two conversations we've had, and both of you guys have been fantastic. Our chat room loves it. We appreciate you so much, and thank you for giving us more time than I ever asked for.
Well, look, it's a pleasure to be on. I'm thrilled to have my name mentioned with Bob. I consider Bob a friend. He's one of the true geniuses in television and media, and I still to this day will follow his lead on that. But I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Pat Crakes Media, and the chat room. You guys, thank you for the comments.